Barron Trump pretends to be a poor student. What his teacher does will leave you speechless. Barron Trump adjusted his hoodie, pulling the fabric over his head as he blended into the bustling hallways of the local public high school. His usual polished appearance had been swapped for worn-out sneakers, faded jeans, and an old backpack with a frayed strap. Today wasn't an ordinary day, it was a secret mission, an opportunity to see the world through the eyes of someone less privileged. He wanted to understand how different life was for kids who didn't have his resources. The moment he entered the classroom, whispers followed. The teacher, Mr. Grayson, eyed him suspiciously, his gaze lingering a bit longer than usual. "Take a seat," the man said curtly, barely masking his disdain. Barron found an empty desk near the back and sat down, trying to avoid drawing too much attention. The class droned on, but Barron couldn't help but notice the difference in how Mr. Grayson treated the other students compared to him. When a girl in the front row asked a question, the teacher smiled and explained patiently. But when Barron raised his hand to clarify a point, Mr. Grayson scoffed. "Maybe if you paid attention, you wouldn't need me to repeat myself," he sneered, eliciting a few chuckles from the other students. Barron swallowed his pride, reminding himself why he was there. But it wasn't easy. Every comment from Mr. Grayson stung more than the last. When the teacher handed out homework, he tossed Barron's paper onto his desk with a snide remark. "I don't expect much from you," he said. The other students began to treat him the same way, mirroring the teacher's attitude. Lunchtime was no better. As he sat alone in the cafeteria, a group of boys walked by, snickering. "Hey, new kid, didn't know this school took charity cases," one of them said, tossing a half-eaten apple onto Barron's tray. He clenched his fists, fighting the urge to respond. He wasn't here to prove a point or show off his true identity. He wanted to experience life without the privilege attached to his name, no matter how harsh it got. Barron kept his composure, determined to press on despite the rising tension. He could feel every judgmental stare and hear every whispered comment behind his back, but he had promised himself to endure it all. He wanted the unfiltered truth, and so far, it was far more brutal than he had imagined. Back in the classroom, Mr. Grayson continued his relentless assault. Every opportunity to embarrass Barron seemed like a game to him. "Why don't you solve this equation on the board?" the teacher said with a crooked smirk, pointing to an advanced calculus problem that was clearly out of the current lesson scope. Barron walked to the front, his heart pounding. He hadn't prepared for this specific question, but he was more than capable of solving it. Taking a deep breath, he began writing out the steps, ignoring the quiet snickers in the background. For a few moments, the room was silent, eyes glued to the board as Barron worked through the equation. Then he circled the answer and turned back toward the class. Silence hung in the air. Mr. Grayson stared at the board, visibly surprised. "Lucky guess," the teacher muttered, refusing to acknowledge Barron's effort. The experience was humbling. Barron hadn't anticipated such overt hostility, especially from a teacher. He realized just how powerful the bias of authority could be, how a simple shift in perception could turn someone into an outcast. Yet he remained undeterred, taking mental notes of every interaction. Later that day, as the bell rang and students poured into the hallway, Barron found himself cornered by the same group of boys from lunch. "Hey, genius," the tallest one said, crossing his arms. "Who do you think you are, trying to show us up in class like that?" "I'm just doing my work," Barron replied calmly. The boys exchanged glances, clearly not used to someone standing their ground. "Maybe you need a little lesson in how things work around here," the leader sneered, stepping closer. Just then, a voice cut through the tension. "Leave him alone." Barron turned to see a girl about his age standing nearby. Her eyes blazed with confidence. "You guys have nothing better to do than pick on someone new," she said, folding her arms. The boys hesitated before backing off, muttering under their breath as they walked away. "You okay?" the girl asked, turning to Barron. "Yeah, thanks," Barron said, genuinely relieved. "I'm new here." "I noticed," she said with a grin. "I'm Emily. Welcome to the roughest school in town." Over the next few days, Emily became Barron's only ally. She showed him around and filled him in on the unspoken rules of the school. Together, they endured the chaos of the classroom and the indifference of the administration. Despite the harsh conditions, Barron found himself gaining a new appreciation for the resilience of students like Emily. They faced obstacles he had never even imagined, yet they pushed forward with determination and hope. But Mr. Grayson wasn't done with him. One afternoon, after class, the teacher called Barron to his desk. "I know your type," he said, his eyes narrowing. "Kids who come in here pretending to be something they're not, thinking they're better than everyone else. You won't last a week here." Barron stared at him, the weight of his disguise pressing down on him. He wanted to reveal who he really was, to call out Mr. Grayson's prejudice right then and there. But he held back. He needed to see how far this would go. The next day, things escalated. Mr. Grayson assigned a group project, pairing Barron with the very boys who had bullied him. It was clear that the teacher had done it on purpose, hoping to make Barron's life even more difficult. The group refused to include him in any of the discussions, leaving him to complete the entire project on his own. When presentation day arrived, Barron stood at the front of the class, holding the poster board he had created. His voice was steady as he explained their findings, but inside, he felt the weight of the unfairness. Mr. Grayson watched with a smug expression, fully expecting Barron to stumble. But instead, Barron delivered a flawless presentation, even answering complex questions with ease. By the end, there was a murmur of surprise from the students. But what happened next caught everyone off guard. The principal, who had been observing from the back of the classroom, stood up. "Mr. Grayson, may I have a word with you in the hallway?" she said, her tone sharp. The classroom fell silent as Mr. Grayson followed her out, his face pale. A few minutes later, the principal returned alone. "Class, I want to apologize for what you've witnessed over the past few days," she said. "We have a responsibility to treat every student with respect, no matter their background." She paused, her eyes meeting Barron's. "Thank you for your resilience and bravery. You've shown us all what true character looks like." As the class erupted in applause, Barron felt a surge of emotion. For the first time since he had arrived, he felt truly seen. The classroom buzzed with energy as the principal's words sank in. For many students, it was a rare moment of accountability, something they had never seen from a teacher like Mr. Grayson. While most of the class clapped and cheered for Barron, there were still a few who exchanged puzzled glances, trying to figure out how this new kid had managed to turn the tide in his favor so quickly. Barron nodded politely, his face calm, but inside, he was still processing everything. He hadn't expected the principal to intervene at all, much less call out Mr. Grayson in front of everyone. It was a validation he didn't know he needed. Emily flashed him a thumbs up from her desk, her grin wide and genuine. When the bell rang, Barron gathered his things and walked out into the hallway, the weight of the week's events beginning to lift from his shoulders. As he made his way to his locker, several students stopped him to offer words of encouragement or admiration. "Hey man, that was cool," one boy said, slapping him on the back. "Grayson's been a jerk for years. Glad someone finally stood up to him." Another student chimed in. "Yeah, he's never been fair. What you did was gutsy." Barron offered a faint smile, accepting their praise with humility. It felt strange to suddenly be the center of attention after days of being treated like an outsider. Part of him wanted to reveal his true identity and explain why he had come here in the first place, but he knew it wasn't the right time. He still had more to learn. Later that afternoon, Barron and Emily sat together at lunch. The atmosphere was noticeably lighter now, the tension from the previous days dissipating. "So, what's your story?" Emily asked, leaning in with curiosity. "You're not exactly like the other new kids we get around here." Barron hesitated. He couldn't tell her everything, not yet. "Let's just say I'm trying to understand things from a different perspective," he said carefully. "There's a lot you don't see when you're on the outside." Emily raised an eyebrow but didn't press him further. "Fair enough. Whatever brought you here, I'm glad it did. We could use more people who aren't afraid to shake things up." As the week went on, Barron continued to blend in with the students, observing and learning as much as he could. He saw firsthand the challenges they faced, not just from teachers like Mr. Grayson but from the system itself. He noticed how the school's resources were stretched thin, how some students came to class hungry or without proper supplies. It was a stark contrast to the privileged world he had grown up in. One afternoon, Barron was walking home when he noticed a group of students gathered around a younger boy who had tripped and dropped his backpack. The boy scrambled to pick up his books as the others jeered and pushed him around. "Hey!" Barron called out, his voice firm. "Leave him alone." The group turned to face him, their expressions defiant. "Who do you think you are?" one of them sneered. "Someone who doesn't stand by and watch bullies," Barron shot back, stepping closer. "Let him go." For a moment, it looked like the situation might escalate, but then the group reluctantly backed off, muttering insults as they walked away. Barron helped the boy gather his things, offering him a reassuring smile. "You okay?" he asked. The boy nodded, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and gratitude. "Thanks. Anytime," Barron said. "Don't let them get to you." By the time he got home that evening, Barron was emotionally drained but also more determined than ever. He had come here to learn about the struggles of ordinary students, but now it felt like something more. He wanted to make a difference, not just for himself but for the friends he had made along the way. The next morning, Barron was called to the principal's office. His heart raced as he walked down the hallway, unsure of what to expect. When he stepped inside, the principal greeted him with a warm smile. "Barron, I've been meaning to talk to you," she said, gesturing for him to sit. "I wanted to thank you again for your courage. You've made quite an impression here." "Thank you," Barron said, his voice steady. "But it wasn't just me. There are a lot of students who've been dealing with unfair treatment for a long time." The principal nodded thoughtfully. "You're right. And that's something we're committed to changing. In fact, I'd like your help." Barron blinked in surprise. "My help?" "Yes," the principal said. "You have a unique perspective and a voice that others listen to. We're forming a student advisory council to address some of the issues you've highlighted. I think you'd be a perfect fit." Barron considered her offer for a moment, then nodded. "I'd be honored." The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings and initiatives. Barron worked closely with the principal and other students, advocating for better resources and fair treatment. He saw changes happening, small ones at first, but significant nonetheless. And through it all, he kept his secret, knowing that his true identity would only complicate things. He wasn't ready to reveal who he was yet, but he also knew that day would come soon. One afternoon, Emily approached him, her eyes filled with curiosity. "So, are you ever going to tell me who you really are?" she asked with a playful smirk. Barron chuckled. "Maybe someday," he said. "But for now, let's just focus on making this place better." Emily nodded, accepting his answer. "Fair enough. Just promise me one thing." "Anything," Barron said. "Don't disappear on us when things get tough." Barron smiled. "I won't." The air in the classroom grew lighter as the weeks rolled by. Barron's presence seemed to create a ripple effect that no one expected. Teachers became more mindful of their words, and students began speaking up for each other. What once felt like a suffocating environment had slowly transformed into a place of cautious hope. Barron remained at the center of it all, quietly but effectively pushing change forward without revealing his true identity. Emily remained his closest confidant, though she hadn't pressed him again about who he was. She seemed content to enjoy the mystery, observing him with a mix of admiration and curiosity. One afternoon, as they walked through the halls, she nudged him playfully. "You know, for a guy who came out of nowhere, you've sure managed to turn this place upside down." Barron grinned. "It wasn't just me. You've been a part of it too. Everyone has." "Still," Emily said, her eyes narrowing slightly, "there's something about you that doesn't quite add up." Barron's smile faltered for a brief moment before he covered it with a shrug. "Maybe I'm just full of surprises." Emily gave him a knowing look but let it go, for now. That weekend, the school organized a community cleanup day, an event that had been Barron's suggestion during one of the advisory meetings. Students, teachers, and even some parents gathered to repaint walls, fix broken equipment, and plant flowers around the schoolyard. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and camaraderie, a stark contrast to the tension that had hung over the school just weeks before. Barron stood near the entrance, watching it all unfold with a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what he had hoped for, a community coming together, lifting each other up. For a brief moment, he let himself imagine staying here longer, continuing this work indefinitely. But deep down, he knew it wasn't possible. Later that evening, as he walked home, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from his mother. "We need to talk. Call me." Barron hesitated. He knew this moment would come eventually. With a deep breath, he dialed the number. "Hi, Mom," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Barron, sweetheart," Melania's voice was warm but firm. "It's time. We've let you explore and experience things on your own terms, but your father and I agree. You need to come home soon." Barron felt a pang of disappointment but understood her reasoning. "I know," he said quietly. "Just a little longer? I feel like there's still more I can do here." There was a pause on the other end. "All right," Melania finally said. "But not much longer. We miss you, and there are responsibilities waiting for you." "Thank you," Barron said, relief washing over him. "I'll wrap things up soon." The following week, Barron threw himself into his work with renewed determination. He wanted to leave the school in the best shape possible before his departure. He worked tirelessly with the student council, organizing fundraisers and advocating for more resources. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. At the next assembly, the principal stood at the podium, her voice filled with pride. "Today, I want to recognize someone who has made an incredible impact on our school in such a short time. Barron, could you come up here?" The students erupted in applause as Barron made his way to the stage, his heart pounding. Standing in front of everyone, he glanced at Emily, who gave him a supportive nod. "I'm not really one for speeches," Barron began, his voice steady but emotional. "But I want to say thank you. Thank you for welcoming me, for trusting me, and for showing me what real strength looks like. I've learned more from all of you than I ever thought possible." The applause grew louder, and Barron felt a lump rise in his throat. He wasn't ready to say goodbye, but he knew the time was near. After the assembly, Emily caught up with him, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "That was a great speech. But you're still hiding something, aren't you?" Barron chuckled. "You're relentless, you know that?" "Always," she said with a grin. "So, when are you finally going to tell me who you are?" Barron paused, considering his next words carefully. "Soon," he promised. "Very soon." As the school week drew to a close, Barron felt the weight of his upcoming departure settle heavily on his shoulders. He wandered through the halls, soaking in the energy of the place, the sounds of laughter and footsteps echoing through corridors that had become familiar in such a short time. His heart tugged with every step. He had grown attached to this school, to the students, and most of all, to the mission he had taken upon himself. But it was time. Emily approached him after class, her brow furrowed in concern. "Hey," she said, her voice softer than usual. "You've been a little distant. Something on your mind?" Barron hesitated. This was the moment he had been putting off. He could either leave quietly or reveal the truth. He took a deep breath, deciding it was time for honesty. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his eyes locking with hers. "I haven't been completely honest about who I am." Emily crossed her arms, raising an eyebrow. "Oh, really? You don't say," she teased, though her tone was tinged with curiosity. "I'm not just some random new kid," Barron said carefully. "I'm Barron Trump." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily blinked, processing the words. "Wait, the Barron Trump? Like from the news? The son of Donald Trump?" Barron nodded, his expression serious. "I came here to experience something real, something different from the world I've always known. I didn't want anyone to treat me differently because of who my family is." Emily stared at him, her mouth slightly open. Then, to his surprise, she burst out laughing. "Of course. I knew there was something about you that didn't add up." She shook her head in disbelief. "Barron Trump, sitting in a rundown classroom with us? That's wild." "It is," Barron admitted with a chuckle. "But I wouldn't change it for anything. Being here has been one of the best experiences of my life." Emily's smile softened. "You know, you didn't have to hide it. You're still the same guy who helped me with calculus and organized the cleanup day. The fact that you're Barron Trump doesn't change that." Barron felt a wave of relief wash over him. "Thanks, Emily. That means a lot." The next morning, word had spread about Barron's true identity. Whispers filled the hallways as students tried to piece together how they had spent months with someone so famous without realizing it. Some were skeptical, while others were amazed. At the school's assembly later that week, Principal Thompson stood at the podium, addressing the murmurs that had taken over the school. Yes, it's true. Barron Trump has been among us. And while his identity may come as a surprise, let's not forget what truly matters, what he's done for our school. He has been a leader, a friend, and an inspiration to all of us. The applause was deafening. Barron stood near the stage, his heart swelling with pride. He hadn't expected such an outpouring of support. As he looked around, his eyes landed on Emily, who gave him a thumbs up from the crowd. After the assembly, students approached him, shaking his hand and thanking him for everything he had done. Barron took the time to speak with each of them, grateful for their kindness and acceptance. In the days that followed, the school felt like a different place. The changes that Barron had set in motion seemed permanent. Students treated each other with more kindness and understanding. Teachers became more attentive and supportive. It was as if the school had undergone a transformation, and Barron knew it was time for him to move on. On his last day, Emily walked him to the front gates, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "So, this is it, huh?" she said, trying to sound lighthearted. "Yeah," Barron replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's not goodbye forever. We'll stay in touch, I promise." Emily nodded, her smile bittersweet. "You'd better. You've got a lot more to accomplish in this world." Barron pulled her into a hug, holding on for a moment longer than usual. "Thank you for everything, Emily." As he walked away, he turned back one last time, taking in the school that had become his home. His journey here had been unexpected, but it had given him something priceless. A new perspective, new friends, and a renewed sense of purpose. He climbed into the waiting car, his driver glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "Ready to go, Mr. Trump?" Barron looked out the window, his mind already racing with plans for what he would do next. "Yeah," he said with a smile. "Let's go." The car pulled away, leaving the school behind. But Barron knew that a part of him would always remain there, in the laughter-filled hallways and sunlit classrooms where he had found something truly real. And as the city blurred past him, Barron couldn't help but feel excited for the next adventure, wherever it might take him.